Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this very interesting session that's lying ahead of you. I am the session chair, and we're looking at the repositioning of universities as incubators for economic activity. We have a good story to tell, and we have very interesting speakers and contributors. We have even the students that are participating in this. You will be looking at a panel discussion. You will also be introduced to an interviewing session of UniVent, the story that they have to tell. But without any further ado, let me hand over to Dr. Norah Clarke, who is the Director for Entrepreneurship in University South Africa. And Dr. Clarke is coming a long way with entrepreneurship. She is the face of entrepreneurship in South Africa and amongst our universities. Over to you, Dr. Clarke.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity, and a hearty welcome to all the entrepreneurship development enthusiasts and supporters out there, specifically members of the EDHE community and the communities of practice, national communities of practice focused on EDHE objectives. It's so special for us to have a dedicated session in the National Higher Education Conference. And having listened to the proceedings of the past few days, it was very interesting to note that entrepreneurship has become increasingly part of the discussion. The awareness of that, the fact that the engaged university, which we've been talking about this past few days, is also an entrepreneurial university in many ways. We've seen across the national South African ecosystem, but also across the continent, that there's an increasing focus on developing and supporting universities to become entrepreneurial institutions. There's, of course, a lot of debate about what that means, about matters of definition, and we are not getting caught up in those debates. What we are doing from the National Entrepreneurship Development in Higher Education Office at Universities South Africa, USAF, hosting entity of this conference, of course, is we are supporting throughout this ecosystem, the higher education ecosystem in South Africa. We are supporting three very important aspects of entrepreneurship development at universities. We're firstly supporting the development of student entrepreneurship. And for that reason, we have a number of student entrepreneurs who are leaders in the national space. Part of our discussion today, also as the first contributors to our discussion. Our second objective and the second aspect of the mandate that we have as entrepreneurship development in higher education is supporting and developing entrepreneurship across disciplines, making sure that teaching and learning and research across all disciplines stop to reflect about what it means to prepare their students for entrepreneurial participation in the economy. And then thirdly, we focus on supporting entrepreneurial universities, co-developing entrepreneurial universities. And in that sense, really our discussion today is just focused on looking a bit closer at what this entrepreneurial university offers to its staff and students and its community in terms of potential, economic potential, career potential, innovation potential, and the role of the entrepreneurial university. You know that there's been a really big focus on incubators for a very long time. Incubators have been seen as one of the silver bullets, really, to solving the entrepreneurship challenges across our country. And certainly incubators have an important role to play, but in a sense, universities have been incubators for quite some time. Incubators, really, of graduates who then usually, mostly in the past, became employees. We are thinking in this session about the other way in which a university could be an incubator, and already perhaps is an incubator. And that is the incubator within which innovation and entrepreneurship happens, within which student entrepreneurs and student businesses and startups and wonderful new products and inventions that are commercializable are developed and taken to the market, and in a big way impacting the local environment, the local community, but also the broader community in which we live in this country and in our world. With that said, apart from the role of universities' role in knowledge creation, universities have traditionally been considered the incubators that are producing graduates. We are challenging universities now to become the incubators that produce employers, that produce the employers of the future. In this rapidly changing South African and international economic context, it has become increasingly important that universities consider positioning themselves more and more for this additional task. And that is a task of becoming the generators of these new leaders in the economies. Entrepreneurial universities often become more student-centered in their attempts to address the changing requirements for economic participation that graduates face. They actively engage internally and externally in their attempts to explore and redesign their institutional identities and their strategic objectives to include entrepreneurial alternatives. In this session, the USAF World of Work Strategy Group, in collaboration with the EDHE program, bring you a variety of voices. We're bringing you the voices of studentpreneurs as leaders. We're bringing you the voices of executive leaders, and we are bringing you the voices of everyone in the middle. We are hoping to really create the world that we are looking for. Thank you very much. Just one more last closing comment. The tone and context of this session is really going to be set by the studentpreneurs who will be starting us off now. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clarke, and thank you for introducing entrepreneurship as part of the co-development of our students within our universities that are also seen as incubators. And that is so spot on in terms of your analysis of where we are. Colleagues, as mentioned by Dr. Clarke, the student voice is very important for us. So the next panel discussion is really looking and responding from a student voice point of view. So I would like to introduce Ms. Phetha Mchunu. She is the chairperson of the EDHE Student Entrepreneurship Community of Practice. And I remind the colleagues, please, in the panel, in the conference pack are all the bio sketches, but over to you, Ms. Mchunu.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Dr. Van Staden. Good morning to our ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to my colleagues, and good morning to our lovely virtual audience tuning in from all corners of the world. So in the last couple of years, universities have more or less assumed a prominent role in science and technology-based economic development. And during this entrepreneurial growth within the universities have kind of become the hub for competitiveness, for economic growth, for wealth creation within the modern world. So this new role for universities that we're looking at seems as if, from one hand, it involves a radical change in the internal organization, and on the other hand, it looks as if there must also be radical change through the different mechanisms that universities provide to students, such as information on patenting and licensing and research and so on. So what we'll be looking at today when I'm speaking to my three guests is how exactly universities are developing economically active graduates and preparing them for the world of work and entrepreneurship. Joining me today, we have Nthambeleni, an articulate, qualified economist, a student leader, and an entrepreneur from the University of Zululand. He's also the managing director of Nyanga's Team Holding, an entertainment company, and a data collector for Moses Kotane Institute. Good morning, Nthambeleni. We also have Nombulelo Ncube from MUT, currently studying an advanced diploma in human resource management. She's also the CEO of Zinum Kwasa, I'm sorry, Nombulelo, you might have to just correct me on that, who specialize in resource and business management consulting. She's also the director of Nthambeleni Group, a company which is a mechanical and electrical engineering supply group. And finally, we have Gugulethu Dlamini, a science and technology student at SMU, who is currently getting her undergraduate degree at BSc in Life Sciences and is currently pursuing an honors degree in BSc Zoology. Thank you so much, my guests, for joining me today. If I can maybe then just start off the conversation, my first question would really be directed to Nthambeleni. Nthambeleni, you are currently aimed at studying something which has to do with a lot of research. And I'm sure throughout your research, you've come up with a sort of role of what exactly a good research department helps in when it comes to boosting entrepreneurial activity. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Morning, Phetha, and everyone listening to this conversation. It remains important to have good research, not only for us as academics, but in terms of scanning the environment and ensuring that we are becoming responsive to the environment which we are operating in a good way. However, the universities are always keen to make sure that the research becomes so good, but in terms of implementing it and making sure that it becomes responsive to the current issues and it put into places, being implemented by the department or whomever directed to, it becomes so difficult. Hence, we are faced with issues whereby we have shortage of resources, we have shortage of more things to be done in terms of policies in entrepreneurship space. Not because we don't have enough research, we have enough research. Only what we don't have is the will of implementing whatever is on the book that we as researchers, we put into paper. So that remains a core issue in our space. In terms of research, we have perfect good research out there, and the issue is implementation of the research.
Thank you so much for saying that. So throughout your journey with research, what are the kind of difficulties that you have faced? And how is that linked to your entrepreneurial journey as well?
In most cases, the resource becomes the main issue in terms of making sure that the research is being put into effective. But whenever it's put into effective, then it becomes an issue to implement it. So in my journey as a student and also as an entrepreneur, the resource has been the main issue. Wherever we go, the resource becomes an issue. For instance, for us as entrepreneurs, the space to operate becomes an issue whenever you have gotten the resource of which it's financially based, but the space to operate would become also an issue. So that's why I would emphasize that the resources always becomes an issue in our space as entrepreneurs and also as academics. It may be financial for one, other one may be, you may be settled financial, but the land or the operation space becomes an issue. Hence, that's why we're urging universities to have spaces for us as students and also ensure that wherever we as students are operating, they give us licenses where we can operate. They must have committees which will administer the process and make sure that we operate in an effective way and in a way that is being taken into consideration and that is based on scrutiny. So that's how the license is operating within our context of our universities will help us to be following regulation and so on and so on.
Thank you so much for that reply. I think what you've highlighted about the shortage of resources is quite a big issue because it impacts so many students who wish to go into entrepreneurship. So definitely having that kind of support for entrepreneurs, even whether it's in the form of giving them licenses to operate within campuses, really makes a difference. And thank you so much for your input, Nthambeleni. Gugulethu, good morning.
Good morning, Phetha, as well as everyone that's joining us this morning, apologies.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So your experience is not quite like, I would say, most university experiences. When you're looking at some of the other universities, such as TUT perhaps, or you're looking at WITS, these universities contain a number of fields and thus a number of entrepreneurs within this field with varying diversities of what exactly the business is. But your experience is not quite the same because your university, SMU, is quite specifically focused on the health aspect. So could you just tell us what the entrepreneurial environment is in that kind of situation?
Yes, of course. I think the most interesting part about being in a health science university is the blend between healthcare workers as well as science and technology students. And what has attributed to creating that entrepreneurial environment, we saw through the fact that we are so far from access towards shops and goods and services. So students then have said, okay, how do we then create access for our fellow students within the university? So creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And in 2018, we then established a student entrepreneurship and innovation hub that aims to promote, support, and encourage entrepreneurship, amplifying the voice of the students that have already started. And this has created such great momentum in that we were able to understand that there are students who are postgrads who are saying, you know, I want to create a business afterwards, but I do not have the understanding. So I kind of have to learn while I go. So we then, in 2019, won a seed funding for a incubator, a center for entrepreneurship and rapid growth. And in this incubator, we aim to help students broaden their entrepreneurship space. So not only just providing food within the campus, but starting to think, how can we be more innovative in the type of businesses that we are like producing? And we definitely hope to enter into the health space, but as scientists, you know, answering a lot of questions that they have and just creating well, rather adding to the environment of entrepreneurship, that the environment that we have already. Yes, I hope I answered the question.
That's fantastic. I'm going to put you a bit on the spot here. What kind of businesses have you seen, or what kind of highlights businesses that you've seen that have come from this kind of environment?
Yes, so looking from the alumni side, we have a student in the healthcare science faculty who has her own dietetics practice. We also have a student within the maths and science department who has her own company that does statistical analysis for companies. And we've also had a student who has created her own handmade mayonnaise that is now sold in stores. And then within the university, students who are still registered as students, we've seen students looking into how they can make pads, but it's still in the production phase. Students who want to make pads, students who want to contribute towards finding solution in the pharmaceutical side of things. So yeah, so far, those are the businesses that we are seeing taking off.
Thank you so much, Gugu. So it seems as though wherever an entrepreneur exists, wherever young minds come together, there's always going to be, these are incubators, but young people are the drivers of that. Young people are creative, they're innovative, and they're always trying to push something new to get us closer to the modern world. So Nthambeleni, as someone who works a lot around leadership and governance, and you also have your own company, which works a lot with human capital and human resources and so on, what exactly would you say is the role of good leadership and governance within a university when it comes to pushing these universities towards a more entrepreneurial mandate?
Good morning, Phetha. Good morning to everyone else. With my experience and of course just our analysis being in the university and trying to advocate entrepreneurship, we think that the one thing that is really important is that these bodies now, the leadership, student leadership as well as the governments, they have to engage and they have to always be updated now with the current economic needs from graduates, because we have exited in the phase where we needed to create job seekers, but now we need to create job creators because there's no more jobs out there. And the student leadership, of course, is closer to students. They know our needs and they know our interests. So if they continually interact with the governance in terms of creating policies, because now the one thing that's really an issue is that we facilitate entrepreneurship and we encourage entrepreneurship, but the policies of the universities, they discourage entrepreneurship. So the continuous engagement as well as assistance in terms of the governance and the student leadership, because some policies have to change one way or the other. So I feel that it's important because it also gives students access to be able to exercise their entrepreneurial activities on campus, because it's not just that we want them to go out there and create jobs, but they have to practice here while they're here, because since now universities actually have to become incubators, because it defeats the whole purpose if you teach me to be a job seeker, but you expect me to go out there and be a job creator. Charity begins at home. I have to practice these things here. And another thing is that with the continuous engagement between these two structures, they're able to give us knowledge and information that is relevant to what they're trying to make out of us. Yes, I think it's basically just that.
We have a little bit of a challenge in terms of technology from Phetha's computer, but I've got some questions to some of the students. As you see the university as the provider of entrepreneurship, how do you see that a university can contribute to that kind of skill? Because, and it's very interesting, yesterday, Professor Dimov in the previous World of Work Strategy Group indicated that entrepreneurship is an art and a skill. And this is what we as a university is trying to part knowledge with you. But Ms. Lenny, you mentioned resources. How do you see the two match up against the resource component vis-a-vis the skills component that you need? And I think Gugu and Nthambeleni mentioned that they need to become a job creator. What is your suggestions with regard to that?
My suggestion would be, in terms of making, I think we are more capacitated in terms of implementing, because statistically, people with post-matric, they're doing very well in entrepreneurial. So we also as graduates, we can do excellently out there if given the environment which we can able to operate on. Like for instance, I think it's time whereby each and every university must make it mandate to have an entrepreneurial hub and also increase its capacity in terms of human capital, who will only be based on entrepreneurial activities. Because now coordinators, they're juggling to manage their academic well-being and also entrepreneurial activity. So universities must have people who will be entrepreneurial based, like beauty has shown it to us, and they've achieved milestones. They are doing very well in terms of that. So we need all universities to come together and say, we are taking part into this, and we will also use our students in terms of procurement and so on, because it makes no much impact where we are pushed to be entrepreneurs, but we are forced to go out in terms of operating. We can't operate within, of which operating with university will help us to grow. And when we go out, we are more capacitated to deal with in terms of orders, in terms of everything, and we can act smart out there because we've learned this, we've got this at an earlier stage. Then to finish your degree after having a smaller business, then you go out. Then when you find that out, it's too complex for you, or you can't cope with the outside environment because you are not using to the bulk ordering and everything involved.
Very, very good answer. And I see the panel chair is back. I'm handing back to you, Phetha.
Thank you so much for holding it down, Dr. Van Staden. You know, no matter how much we develop, you always get a bit of a reminder that we truly have no control over technology. Thank you so much. So maybe just carrying on from what Nthambeleni is saying, if I can take this question to you, Gugulethu, around resources and implementation within your university. During your entrepreneurial journey, what problems have you faced, and have those problems been solved? If they haven't, how can the universities go about solving them? If they have, how did your university give you the support to go through that problem and still achieve your entrepreneurial goals?
Okay, thank you for that question. I think that one of the problems that we've seen is students stretching themselves in different areas of entrepreneurship. So being innovative in their businesses and their approach. I think we tend to be more comfortable in the things that we're used to, and then we stay there. So one challenge that we had is also getting the academias on board. So having lecturers start the conversation within the classroom, saying, okay, this is the work we're doing, but how can we integrate this into a potential business venture? And how do we solve real problems? Because I think as entrepreneurs, we tend to create our own problem and then create a solution for that problem, because we're in the lab, we're in the classrooms, we're in the confines of our books, and it ends there. So one way that the university has assisted is community engagement. So we have a lot of faculties that are integrated with their community so that they can understand and clearly define what is the problem and how we can solve it. Or also asking the community themselves, what do you think a possible solution could be for the problem that you're facing? And it's honestly an ongoing thing, because now we have started bringing on board more stakeholders who will say, okay, how do we get deans on board? How do we get SRC on board? And all of these measures that are put in place are allowing us to stretch our capacity, to stretch the different ideas that we can bring forward. And this is slowly answering and solving the problem that we had initially.
Exactly. That's a key factor, I think. Anyone who's been in entrepreneurship knows that there's a tendency for, once you start your business, that becomes a child. It's like your child, and you never want to change it. However, marrying your idea moves you further away from your purpose and solving the actual issues. Nthambeleni, just quickly from your side before we conclude, what problems have you faced? How has the university helped you solve them?
At the beginning, basically, it was just that lecturers and the student governance didn't really want to interact with students in terms of entrepreneurship. They didn't advocate entrepreneurship. And when us students came up with these ideas and we wanted to exercise our innovativeness as well as our creativeness, it just didn't happen that way. And luckily enough, I'm speaking from a point where I'm actually now a tutor for the module that was actually brought to campus from Wadwani. And we are now able to exercise our entrepreneurial activities on campus, but on really restricted basis. So I think that the governance is really helping us in terms of exercising our entrepreneurial journeys on campus. And it's been a really, they're coming out great. They're coming out great.
So again, the aspect of community and support. Thank you so much, Gugulethu, Nthambeleni, and Nthambeleni for joining us today. This has been such a fruitful session, and I hope our key leaders in governance have been taking notes. I'll hand over back to you, Dr. Van Staden.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mchunu. Colleagues, there's the student voice. You hear the challenges that they have. You hear also the different issues that they are grappling with, and that's what the universities are there for. So the next session that we are going into is an interviewing session run by Dr. Norah Clarke, and it's really looking at the role of vice-chancellors and deputy vice-chancellors in terms of what is their role in this entrepreneurship drive that we have in the institutions. So we have 3 speakers from UniVen, and we are using that as a good example, specifically UniVen being a rural-based campus, university in Limpopo. We are very privileged to have the Vice-Chancellor of UniVen, Dr. Nthambeleni. Welcome to you, Prof. And then also the Deputy Vice-Chancellors for Operations, that's Dr. Robert Martin. And then we have a graduate of the University of Venda, Mr. Promise Nyalungu, who is also the CEO and founder of Stru Arts Entertainment. Over to you, Dr. Clarke. This is going to be very interesting.
Thank you, Chair. And indeed, it's going to be interesting. And how often do we have the opportunity to have a discussion where we have the Vice-Chancellor, a Deputy Vice-Chancellor, and this National Studentpreneur of the Year in one room, all from one institution, just to stop and reflect for a moment on what it took to get to that point of success, to that point where Promise Nyalungu became the Studentpreneur of the Year and the University of Venda became the winning university of the National Student Entrepreneurship, the National Entrepreneurship Intervarsity, of course. So a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so glad our 3 speakers made themselves available. And in that sense, I think we need to just touch base quickly with what our students shared in the discussion with Phetha just now. And I'm hearing the beautiful story of progress within a very short period of time, where entrepreneurship was at first not really considered in a positive light by students in many cases, some unfamiliarity about it, some skepticism about it. Business, I don't come from a place of where, where we do much business. I've been wanting to really get a nice corporate job, and now what's the story about entrepreneurship? And of course, the family who has great expectations for their graduates relative to make it big in the corporate world, perhaps. And then things started changing gradually, and it changed because of advocacy, mainly advocacy from student entrepreneurs, such as the ones in our previous session in the room. And so I know, you heard some of the challenges that they have, some of the struggles that they have, some, issues of resources and support and so forth. But the point is there's progress, there's great progress. And thanks to discussions such as these, there is increasing progress, and across the sector, across the higher sector, one after the other, institutions are just stepping up and saying, right, we're getting the message. We are with you. We are looking at this from a strategic perspective and starting to prioritize looking after us and supporting our student entrepreneurs. So with that, in the National EDHE Entrepreneurship Intervarsity, we have 3 objectives every year. And that is to identify the top student businesses, because in universities, we often don't even know about them. Secondly, to identify the top student entrepreneurs, because often you get someone who's really got the knack and they have multiple successful or less successful startups, but they are the ones who are just, they've got that knack, they've got that talent, and they are sometimes much better positioned than other students who have to come from it, to come at entrepreneurship from a different perspective. And then, of course, lastly, there is the yes. So let's just stop with that and perhaps just move over to the discussion really with the successful team at the University of Venda, and starting with Professor Bernard Nthambeleni, who is the Vice-Chancellor there. Professor or Dr. Nthambeleni, congratulations on winning the Intervarsity. We know it's been probably came as quite a surprise for you, because we often think that big competitions can only be won by big universities. And here you arrived, and University of Venda walked away with this really prestigious award. Would you be willing to share with us what did the winning of this Intervarsity mean for you and for the University of Venda?
Thank you, Dr. Clarke, and also fellow panel members for the opportunity to participate in this session on the repositioning of universities as incubators for economic activation. Quite a very important session indeed. Dr. Clarke, when we were announced an overall winner of the 2020 Intervarsity competition, we were very elated. We were very, very overjoyed. By winning this award, we believe that the recognition of hard work that we've put as an institution and achievement by our student and staff is beginning to bear some fruits. And also, this award that we won sort of affirmed our resolve and boosted our morale and motivation to pursue the direction that we have set for our university. This also proved to us that, despite our geographical location, which is largely rural, that we are able to compete and showcase our student talent and also hold our ground. And winning this award also meant that, to our leadership, that the role that we are playing as leaders in creating an entrepreneurial culture, an ecosystem, is becoming to bear some noticeable fruits and gaining momentum across the institution, which is quite very important for us, because we want to make sure that the entire university get to be informed and able to understand where we are going. Our quest to provide all students with opportunity to engage in some form of entrepreneurial thinking and also to develop an entrepreneurial culture in the university was much more driven by our resolve as management, because we believe that as management, we are at the center to ensure that we guide the process that needs to happen in the institution. And we also wanted to ensure that our staff and students are equipped to inculcate the entrepreneurial thinking in all what we do in the institution, how we use the resources. So we wanted to make sure that we bring this culture on board as we lead the university. Over to you.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. Very, very interesting to hear your take on this, and also your mention of this very important word of concept institutional culture also. And in terms of the institutional culture, Dr. Robert Martin, as in your designation and in your role as Deputy Vice-Chancellor Operations, you were tasked with driving entrepreneurship in the institution, which is a rather unconventional task for a Deputy Vice-Chancellor Operations. How did it come about that you became part of this culture of entrepreneurship that has started blossoming in the University of Venda?
Sorry, yes. Good morning to you, and also good morning to all the colleagues and panelists. Well, my journey at the university within the entrepreneurship stream, or what we call the entrepreneurial thrust, actually started with what the Vice-Chancellor just referred to, that us as management in the institution, we realized that we needed to reposition Univen for greater impact. And so it really just started with us recrafting our new strategy. And one of our 4 strategic thrusts, we decided would be the entrepreneurial university strategic thrust. And because of my experience in entrepreneurship at the personal level, it was actually just a natural, you know, what do we call it, a process for me to sort of volunteer to champion the strategic thrust. I don't think any of us were thinking about our individual sort of portfolios, because as a collective, as management, we realized that we wanted to take the sort of university in a different sort of direction. So I don't think it is anything fantastic of me. I just assumed the role, and then decided to then champion this. But what we also wanted to do was, we had a focus of creating a much more multidisciplinary approach in the university. And so the entrepreneurial university strategic thrust was giving us that sort of opportunity to bring different faculties, but also different divisions within the university together. I suppose then it would make sense that the DVC operations, because it's not an sort of academic, would then take the responsibility to bring the different, you know, it was easier for me to have sort of discussions with colleagues across different disciplines, because I didn't have the baggage of coming from a specific discipline. Well, that's the way that I thought it would be. And it just very nicely fitted in with our approach to bring colleagues across different disciplines and across different fields sort of together. So in my view, that was really, yeah, just a very exciting next step for me to also fulfill some of my own personal sort of entrepreneurial desires. Thank you.
Dr. Martin, so interesting also to see how your own perspective on this and Dr. Nthambeleni's perspective reflects the strategic resolve in the university leadership to really strengthen what has been happening from the ground up amongst students and definitely amongst some members of staff as well. And just the way that the strategic resolve of leadership opened the doors and just enabled, you know, a much faster transition into becoming an entrepreneurial institution. Now, promise, Mr. Nyalungu, yes, you are a favorite of the EDHE team. As you know, we've liked working with you too in two entrepreneurship intervarsities the past 2 years. But last year, you became the National Studentpreneur of the Year. How did you get there? And perhaps also, how did the institution play a role in your getting to the point where you own this really desirable title?
Thank you so much, Dr. Clarke. I think how I got here was, it was a seed that was planted a long time ago. You know, when I was still in primary school, I was once casted for a drama play. And little did I know that that would be my fate. And what happened was, from that performance, I started developing a passion for the performance art. But unfortunately, the primary schools that I went to in the rural areas did not have platforms for me to practice that. And when I went to university, I then decided that I was going to join a debate team. But little did I know that the University of Venda had a drama group. So when I was going to the venue to do my debate class, I met a group of students in a corner who were then practicing drama. And I joined that group. And together we grew, and we managed to actually convince the university that, you know, as a group would like to professionalize what we are doing, even though the university doesn't offer the performance art as a degree. And then we worked with a lady by the name of Dr. Ramaite, who is late now, may have so rest in peace, who made sure that we actually got to participate in platforms such as the National Arts Festival. And my performance at the National Arts Festival is what opened my eyes to the arts being a business. And then coming back from the National Arts Festival in 2016, I funded my own company, of which then now I wanted to make sure that other kids who were outside the university can also get the platform to showcase their talent, because I knew the problems that they were facing on the ground. And then that's when I got to know about EDHE. And my story with EDHE actually goes a long way, because I knew of EDHE before they could actually launch it, and I was waiting for its launch. And when it was launched, I was one of the lucky ones to reach the national finals of the inaugural competition. And from there, I thought that year really that we were gonna bring it home, but unfortunately, we did not win anything. We came back empty-handed. And then that's when a lot of people started talking that, yeah, we told you were wasting your time with all of these entrepreneurship things. But then Dr. Martin invited us to one workshop that they hosted, where they wanted to teach us more about what is entrepreneurship. And because I think they watched some of our pitches, because even the University of Venda once had an internal competition where we were pitching. And then from there, that's when now we got to be facilitated, and we actually got to learn a bit about what went wrong with our pitch in the year that we did not win. And then coming back now in 2020, which was last year, and we came back now with like a serious game face to say we're coming back for everything. And indeed, we managed to get back to the national finals. And as you all know, that's when we got there to the national finals and they called my name, and then the room just went silent. And I think I recovered my ears after a week of that, because I still couldn't believe it. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's the story of how I became the Studentpreneur of the Year. It was all because of this passion that I had for the arts. And I believe now with more than passion, it's just purpose. And I thank EDHE every day for making sure that I water this purpose of mine. And I also encourage others to join.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nyalungu. The very inspirational story, and wonderful to know how the knack, that entrepreneurial knack was already there, but that the university had a role to play to really allow Promise and his team to reach their potential in business. And with that also, Promise, yes, we're looking forward to hearing a bit more about how the business has been doing since, but we'll get to that just now. First, to our Vice-Chancellor again, Dr. Nthambeleni, how do you see the role of the executive leadership at the University of Venda in entrepreneurship development at your institution?
Thank you, Dr. Clarke. The role that has to be played by executive leadership in the establishment of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the University of Venda is very profound. And this is what I say, all over where we've got an opportunity to speak, to say leadership is key in whatever that you want to achieve. Firstly, in our vision to rejuvenate the University of Venda, as already stated by Dr. Martin, we identify entrepreneurial development as one of our strategic thrusts. We came to realize, the point that, we should move away from this notion that defines universities as factories that produced, labor force, by training students, to be job seekers, instead of, training them and teaching them to become, creating their own jobs. So that was the practice in terms of where we're coming from. To say we must move away from that notion, and we must do what we can to ensure that we're able to achieve that thing. We also knew that, as leadership of the University of Venda, that by mere identifying and documenting, our desire to establish this entrepreneurial culture and ecosystem in our plan, it's not enough just to have it there, in your documents. And to give impetus to this vision, we develop what we call the UNIVEN Integrated Entrepreneurship, Innovation and Biodiversity Plan, to drive the institution to transform itself towards an entrepreneurial university. And that was quite very key for us, because now we identified a drive in terms of how do we get there and make sure that we're able to follow those steps in. And our objective through this plan is to reposition the institution to serve as an anchor institution within the Venda Biosphere Reserve, where we are located, and to contribute to government's initiatives such as the district development model, the biodiversity economy, and also the Operation Pakisa. And we see the role of leadership in that team. We are also pleased that we were able to sign a memorandum of agreement with a small enterprise development agency, after our engagement with the Department of Small Business, to establish what we also call the University of Venda Center for Entrepreneurship Rabbit Incubator, which now really begins to really put these things to the front. And we will be putting that a center as we now have funding for that team. We believe that this will greatly assist in strengthening this ecosystem that we want to build, and also leverage government support, business, and other universities to work along. So that's how we see our leadership in terms of how we have to do that. We must provide a very motivating and visible leadership so that we're able to achieve all what we need to do to achieve. Thank you so much.
Dr. Nthambeleni, what's so wonderful in your response here is how you are just once again describing the engaged university. So what you're doing here as in your process of positioning increasingly as an entrepreneurial university, you are just reflecting so many of the principles also of the engaged university, and that is so encouraging. I see we have another 8 minutes only left, and I would have liked to have much more time with the three of you colleagues. But at this stage, I think, may I ask Dr. Martin for you to just give us, perhaps in a nutshell, what made you decide to replicate the national EDHE communities of practice within the University of Venda? What was your thinking behind that? Because that, of course, triggered a whole process. We were doing this across the ecosystem now through our new economic activation offices that we are rolling out in the next 3 years across universities. But what worked for you in that model, and why did you want to replicate this within the institution?
Well, thank you, Dr. Clarke. I think as any good entrepreneur will attest, that we constantly look for strategies to leapfrog, because we don't have time to catch up. And as an institution that is, as the VC has indicated, a rural-based university, we very much wanted to show to the world that this institution, as we reposition it, are able to impact the world from where we are. And so it made sense for me when I looked at the sort of communities of practice of EDHE, to then, together with our multidisciplinary approach, as I have indicated, and our drive to bring colleagues from different disciplines together, to just replicate those COPs, at the institution, because in a way you would be able to recognize and give recognition to those colleagues that have already, it's not as if nothing was done in the institution. We just needed to bring things together. So it made sense for me to then have colleagues that were already doing work within the studentpreneurship area, within the curriculum together, and then give them the support to fast track then what they have already done. We then created also the COP for the entrepreneurial sort of university. And that was really to look within the institution to start to address some of the challenges which the previous session, the students indicated all the obstacles that, that they experience within the institution. So our COP that look at the institution would do exactly that, would look at the policies, the processes and procedures within the institution that we require, that either we require to develop or to change, such that we are able to give, the support that both students and staff sort of require in the institution. But we went a step further now. We created another COP for that is looking at the sustainable development goals, and we have linked that with social entrepreneurship. So, and why we have done so is because it would allow us to strengthen our community engagement sort of initiatives. So this is how we try to, as I've indicated, fast track what we do, but also to sort of leapfrog so that we are able to contribute also to the bigger agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Very encouraging, and you even have a brilliant new community of practice. Well, we've got to talk about this next week at the EDHE, and perhaps it's something that other universities might want to follow suit in. So, colleagues, we have 3 minutes really in which to wrap up. And I was wondering, I see questions in the chat from the audience specifically about Promise and how his business is doing. But I saved our last question for the Vice-Chancellor. Dr. Nthambeleni, might we request that you sacrifice your speaking opportunity for a last word to the Studentpreneur of the Year, because he obviously has followers out there who wants to know how's business going. Are you giving me permission to give your 3 minutes to Promise?
That's okay, Dr. Clarke.
Thank you so much, Vice-Chancellor. Promise, you have 3 minutes. Tell your followers out there how is business going, and please tell them also. We just also spoke a little bit about. No, never mind. You just go for it.
Thank you, Dr. Clarke. So for those who follow us out there online, most would know that we grew from being just a performance arts group to being a media and entertainment company, and of which that was as part of some of the investment that we got from winning the competition. But winning the competition also opened doors, because following the EDHE competition, I also got a chance to partake in the Global Student Entrepreneurship Awards, of which we came out as the runner-ups, and we managed to attract a lot of investors. And then we got into this program by the Business and Arts South Africa, which is called the Debut Program, where they're also helping us to restructure our business to make sure that in terms of arts development, we become more profitable, and we structure it in a way that, it's in line with what other people are doing in the arts. And we have actually managed to also open up a position for interns in our new studio that we have just opened. And we are currently looking for 5 new interns that will be working with us. And the position that we have advertised, we're looking for a graphic designer, we're looking for a videographer, we're looking for a video editor, and 2 image editors. And all of this is because what we are trying to do is we want to shine the spotlight on rural and township creatives, because we understand how difficult it can be for them. Also due to the fact that, with COVID-19 also came the issue of moving to the digital medium. And it's also a very hard platform for those people who are in rural areas because of equipment, access to professional facilities. And we actually managed to make sure that we bridge this gap. And one other element that we just did last week was that there was also this other girl who just wrote a book. She's 16 years old. She wrote a book about bullying. And she was supposed to have a TEDx talk with the University of Cape Town. And she was supposed to travel all the way to Joburg to go and shoot her video. And we actually told them that, no, you can come to our studio. And they came through, and we did a very beautiful talk, of which I wish everyone would be able to see. I think it's going to be showing this Friday. And we are also in the process of shooting a few documentaries that are in the pipeline. We're in the process of shooting web series. We have also started our own podcast, and we are also supporting other students who are having their own podcasts. And what we do in our studio is just, we just cut the rates so that students can also afford to come in and use the facilities. And in a nutshell, that's pretty much what has happened. I won't mention all because there's like a lot of accolades that came with winning the student entrepreneurship, and a lot of attention, you know, and also a lot of government support in reaching out that they want to assist in helping us become like a better structure, a better organization, because we are at the heart of youth development, and we are also at the heart of just making sure that rural and township talent get the opportunity to be seen.
Wonderful, Promise, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, are you hearing why he's a successful businessman, promoting, using the opportunity to do his recruitment while he's got the microphone? Recruitment and also, of course, you know, just doing the wonderful marketing that a good business person should be doing. So well done on that, Promise. And just one thing we did not mention, Chair, as I wrap up here, the wonderful example this sets for us is, yes, we know about all the wonderful, really high-tech entrepreneurs there that do research-based, that have research-based startups, innovation-based startups, and technical type startups. But what's beautiful here is the critical role that the arts as entrepreneurship can play. Artists have been entrepreneurs for all time, and Promise is just giving a new face to that very important discipline, also the performing arts, and its role in society through his business. Thank you very much, Dr. Nthambeleni, Dr. Robert Martin, and Mr. Promise Nyalungu. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clarke, and thank you for leading this interviewing session. And as the comments are also saying, and it's from Dr. Churamimwe, in terms of the support from the highest level in the university, from the Vice-Chancellor, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, is absolutely imperative. And I think that is the story that we can read into the UNIVEN role of leadership that turned around the ship within the institution. But colleagues, we're going into our next session, and the speaker is Professor Dharesh Ramjugana, as a Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Learning and Teaching in the Stellenbosch University. And he's grappling with the question of, is a university an incubator, or is the university as an incubator? And what's the implication, again, for the university leaders? Over to you, Professor Ramjugana.
Thank you very much, Dr. van Staden, and good morning to the fellow colleagues in the session, as well as ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure this morning to come and share with you some of my thoughts in that regard. I'm just going to share my screen. I think, Chair, if you could just let me know if you can see my screen on your side.
Yes, we can. Affirmative.
Okay, no, thanks very much for that, Chair. So colleagues, I think, you know, some time ago, Dr. Clarke and I were kind of discussing about how do we take the institutions of higher education forward in terms of being real knowledge producers, but obviously converting that knowledge as well into socioeconomic impact for the country. And you know, I've been dabbling with the whole issue with regards to universities and the role that they play, their purpose, and how they got to start to play a more greater kind of socioeconomic impact in terms of delivering on and addressing the challenges which the country currently faces. And I started that about 10 or 15 years ago. And I think at the time I was probably one of the lone voices with regards to pushing this agenda about entrepreneurial universities and the role that entrepreneurial universities have got to play, and the importance of the leadership of those institutions in delivering and making those institutions entrepreneurial. And so it was extremely heartening to hear the session before this, where we had the Vice-Chancellor Dr. Nthambeleni and Dr. Martins, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, talking about how they, as leadership, were pushing the agenda for the creation of an entrepreneurial university. But anyway, Dr. Clarke, you gave me this task of looking at the university as an incubator or the university with an incubator. And I think really you've heard from the Vice-Chancellor in the previous session about the university being looked at much broader as an incubator as opposed to just an incubator sitting within an institution. And I think the role of the leadership is critical and key in that regard. I just see I've got a little problem with my presentation. So colleagues, I think you know, we've heard from the University of Venda about the purpose of universities, and I just wanted to kind of highlight what I see as the purpose of universities and how we're going to see it deviating from what we have traditionally seen as the purpose of universities. I think Dr. Clarke talked about this. You know, we've seen them as kind of incubators for the production of graduates, and that's been our kind of teaching and learning pillar at the institution. We've seen them as the producers of research and postgraduate students, and that's been the research pillar at the institution, and about real kind of social impact that we have through the community outreach. But I think, you know, as time has evolved, the country is calling for more than just you know, production of graduates and the production of research and community outreach and engagement and development, but about really being able to directly address the kind of socioeconomic challenges that the country is facing at the moment. And the quadruple challenges that we're facing as a country, you know, it's a high unemployment rates that we have, the massive poverty, the kind of low sustained economic growth rates that we've had over more than 10 years as a country. And then obviously the massive inequality, a country with one of the highest Gini coefficients in the world. And I think, you know, the universities in this regard have got to look a lot more broader in terms of their role now and their purpose. And they've got to become more innovative, they've got to become more engaged, and they've got to become entrepreneurial. And this is talks now about how universities have got to see their role expanding drastically and being the incubators now of a kind of an entrepreneurial, engaged ecosystem. I think these numbers are slightly outdated. I see that the latest numbers are unfortunately a lot more worse than what you can see in the slide now. But we have, I think, over 9 million unemployed South Africans at the moment. The worst affected are young people between the ages of 18 to 25. And in that particular age group, it's approximately about 50% unemployment. And then if you look at the definition of youth, and you know, that goes up to the age of 35, we have almost 73% of citizens in that age group that are unemployed. And then that the whole notion that universities, you know, could serve the purpose of producing graduates so that they could get employment. I mean, that whole notion seems to be going away now, because we got almost, I think the latest figure is almost 800,000 graduates from tertiary education that are seeking employment or unemployed. And I think, you know, the students have touched upon this, that the universities were training students to be employees, but not the creators of employment. And I think that is where university leadership has also got to start to see its role in terms of driving that agenda, so that we work more towards how do we create a conducive ecosystem and environment at the university to nurture the kind of skill sets and mindsets, so that people and our students in particular start to think more about the creation of employment and being employment creators as opposed to just job seekers. Now, when you look at entrepreneurs, they have a whole range of qualities, and it doesn't necessarily mean that these qualities have to be used specifically for commercialization or for enterprise development. I think any of these qualities, if we could embed and instill them into not just our students, but also into our staff and into our leadership at the institution, will make us much more effective and much more efficient organizations. but it'll also go a long way to the graduates that we produce, having the kind of softer skill sets that will make them a lot more, not for the start employable, but also a lot more driven to look at opportunities, to seize opportunities, and to take those opportunities for job creation. You know, so total self-belief, self-motivation, the ability to rebound, determination to succeed, driven and focused, making things happen. And, you know, the bottom line, passion, passion, passion. I think these are the qualities that you normally see in entrepreneurs. And I think when you talk about developing a kind of an entrepreneurial mindset within our higher education institutions, we want to embed and instill these kind of qualities in our staff and in our students. Leadership also needs to look at the fact that universities cannot work in isolation. I think gone are the days of the kind of ivory tower mentality that we had in the higher education system. And we got to work in a what we term a quadruple helix, where there's a strong drive towards multidisciplinary and transdisciplinarity, and the various sectors, business, the higher education institutions, civil society, and government, and all three tiers of government, local government, provincial government, and national government, working very closely together. So I think that is where universities got to see their role changing significantly, as not just being these isolated organizations in which you are producing graduates and undertaking research and then undertaking some community engagement, but are really becoming the epicenter of the region and for entrepreneurial and innovative kind of activities. And I think that is where the big shift is going to be. And that is where the university leadership in particular has to understand that we're going to work in a lot more partnership and a lot more collaboration, not just with the other universities in the country and in the region, but obviously with business, with industry, with government, and with civil society. And that's the whole concept behind the quadruple helix. It takes a special type of mindset in that regard. It takes a mindset of a leader in the higher education system that starts to look much more broadly than just the, should we say, the budget drivers of the institution, but more about the impact that the institution can have in driving socioeconomic upliftment in the region and in the country. Now, I always say that when you start to look at an institution and what makes an entrepreneurial institution, it goes much broader than just having an incubator on the campus. It goes to the entire mindset and the leadership and the governance of the institution. It talks about the initiatives that you have in terms of capacity development and driving an agenda for being entrepreneurial and for being innovative and having the right kind of incentives in place. It talks about the entire development of entrepreneurship in learning and teaching, not just in terms of lecturing about entrepreneurship, but about practical entrepreneurship and how you build that into the learning and teaching within the institution. It talks about creating this mindset and a culture and embedding it within the institution. And then really about, as I mentioned before, ensuring that this takes place with very strong partnerships and relationships. And then obviously ensuring that you have a strong internationalization agenda as well that helps strengthen the university towards being an engaged entrepreneurial university. Now, I think you've heard it in terms of what the University of Venda has done. Very strong leadership, no lip service in terms of being an entrepreneur or striving to be an entrepreneur university, but it being a major part of the institution's strategy, and as a university actually living it out and practicing it on a daily basis. Having senior leaders within the institutions that have a portfolio that's specifically for the area of innovation and for entrepreneurship, and for actually managing and coordinating this in an integrated manner across the institution. And I think you know, when Dr. Martin was speaking, he shared about this integrated plan that they have within the institution, and about actually creating an environment where everyone within the institution starts to behave in an entrepreneurial manner. Because when you start to behave in an entrepreneurial manner, then you create the best effectiveness and efficiencies within the institution. Business processes function a lot better. The university just gets a lot more agile and functional and effective in terms of its business. And then the institution that drives the entrepreneurial agenda for the region. And that's where leadership needs to be so critical, because the Vice-Chancellor, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor needs to engage with the stakeholders, as I had mentioned in the quadruple helix, to ensure that the university then becomes the epicenter for this kind of activity in the region. Human resources and the whole kind of human resource aspect of it is critical in terms of funding and resources for entrepreneurship, putting the right kind of funding in place, the models in place, breaking down silos, creating an engaged entrepreneurs, staff development and student development in terms of entrepreneurship, and putting incentives and rewards for entrepreneurship. These all speak to leadership and the role that leadership as well has to play in terms of driving this kind of behavior within the organization. Same thing goes for learning and teaching. It's about moving away from just the kind of academic teaching of entrepreneurship to the actual practical experiences of entrepreneurship, sustaining and supporting it with the institution, with validating entrepreneurial outcomes, having engagements with stakeholders, creating the kind of opportunities for staff and students to really practice and engage in terms of entrepreneurship, and developing that kind of mindset and skill sets during the studies, as well as during their stay at the institution. About creating a real culture of entrepreneurship, raising awareness about it, actively encouraging individuals to become entrepreneurs, experiencing entrepreneurship through various opportunities, and then really about moving from idea to action to implementation. And that is where when you start to look at as an institution, as an incubator, as opposed to just an incubator, the entire institution becomes this living laboratory in which you start to practice entrepreneurship, but also as a living laboratory that then builds an entrepreneurial activity for the region. Stakeholders and relationships are key, and that's where leadership as well has to play an important part in building that kind of collaboration. And then it speaks to a number of things in terms of infrastructure that can be developed in partnership with stakeholders, and things like incubators, science parks, initiatives that are used to drive entrepreneurship behavior and activity. And then obviously also promoting mobility so that you have the exchange of ideas from entrepreneurs and practitioners on the campus itself. And it's really about building an entire knowledge ecosystem that is centered around the institution and the university. Internationalization has a huge role to play in that as well. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to ensure that the best practices with regards to entrepreneurship and engagement are brought to the institution. Leadership has got to play an important role in terms of building those kind of platforms for internationalization and exchange and mobility programs to take place. So just in summary, I think leadership is key to ensuring that we move away from just thinking about the fact that having an incubator that's placed at a higher education institution is sufficient and would drive the kind of culture that we want to see develop within the country, that will then start to address these kind of quadruple challenges that we face in the country at the moment. They've got to see the university as the kind of incubator that drives entrepreneurial activity, that starts to produce the kind of graduates and the type of staff that can ensure socioeconomic upliftment in the region and in the nation. So innovation and entrepreneurship is key to addressing socioeconomic challenges being faced by the country. The higher education institutions need to ensure, and this happens through their leadership, that they evolve from simply teaching and learning, research and engagement to drivers of innovation and entrepreneurship. Partnership is key, building strong relationships through the various sectors be it civil society, be it other higher education institutions and research organizations, business, industry, and government, is key to ensuring that we build this kind of ecosystem which is in the best interest of the nation and its citizens. And I can't emphasize enough, and you've seen it firsthand in terms of the experiences shared with University of Venda, how university executives are critical to the creation of an entrepreneurial university and a culture of entrepreneurship, and are key to ensuring that we move our universities. And I think the term that I heard during the last couple of days is also in the terms of a developmental institution or developmental university. So it's kind of creating these developmental, engaged, entrepreneurial universities that have this purpose about ensuring socioeconomic development for the country. And I think that's the important role. The universities become incubators for this kind of change that we want to see, as opposed to just having an incubator that promotes entrepreneurship. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ramjuganath. Colleagues, this is the last speaker. I'm inviting any kind of questions that you have. Please post them in the chat box. I've noted some comments as well in terms of the Univen role, also in terms of Professor Ramjuganath, and let's come back to our theme of our conference is an engaged university. And the one that you have clearly indicated is the quadruple helix. And that is very important for us as being an engaged university, that we engage with government, with the academia, with industry, with social society and civil society. But how do you, and I want to pose the first question while I'm waiting for the participants to ask some more questions, is that in terms of the limited resources, and there was a statement yesterday in one of the sessions as well, that we have to reimagine the distribution of resources. How do we do that and building this quadruple helix in terms of our partnership? Do we need new money? Do we need to look at redistribution of current resources? We know entrepreneurship as an entity are not funded within our universities. If you do offer that through a formal program, then it becomes subsidized, but we've learned that formal programs do not train and give us entrepreneurs. It is how you go about and the support you provide, and that's the majority of the comments of the students, is that students need to be allowed access to all these centers, the incubators, the innovative centers. Policies need to be synchronized. Offices need to be established. They want to do the business on the campus, but how do you bring all this together?
So Dr. Verstappen, I think that's an important point. I think we're too small a country with too few higher education institutions that are competing with each other. I think that's the big challenge. We're competing for the same pie. And so as a result of that breeds a kind of competitive behavior for your slice of the pie, right? And I think what we got to really move ourselves past is that we're fighting for that pot of subsidy, but about how do we actually create a larger pot, and that's by actually building those kind of relationships with industry, with business, with civil society, and when we're talking about other institutions, we're talking about engaging with other institutions on a global scale, so that you then start to, through partnership and through critical mass, starting to build a kind of networks that will enable you to first enlarge your resources for you to be able to tackle this enormous challenge that we have within the country. And really it's about the mindset of university leadership. I think when university leadership is very insular and looks at the organization as just the organization and about what the resources are within the organization, and then doesn't start to look at how you can leverage in terms of building of partnerships and engagement across the sector, then you have a serious problem. And I think that is where the mindset needs to shift. We got a lot of university leaders now that are starting to think along those lines, but that wasn't the problem. That wasn't the issue 5 or 10 years ago. We had university leadership that were thinking very insular and just about their organization and not about the purpose of their organization and the role that it plays in the entire higher education sector in terms of us addressing the challenges of the country.
Thank you very much for your response there, Prof. And I want to direct the questions and the comments and discussions that we have now more to our students. And we have now the example of Univen. We know Stellenbosch University is also having a different approach. My university, University of the Free State, is focusing on the research component of postgraduate and to bring the innovation together with the entrepreneurship. So there's different ways in doing it, but my question is to any of the students participating, and Promise, you indicated that you won an award in the arts area, which is part of your discipline. But what is most important for you as students? Your passion that you want to drive, and maybe the passion is way outside your discipline of which you are studying within the institution, or is it your field of study that you want to pursue in terms of your business? What is more, Promise, and maybe I'm going to start with you, is more important, colleagues, and we've got about 4 minutes left.
Thank you very much, Dr. Van Staden. I think for me, all of them are important. You see, this concept brings me, someone was asking this question last week as to why are students more reluctant now that the lockdown levels are dropping? Why are they more reluctant to go back to class? This is because as students, we don't see the university as a place where it's all about learning. It's about keeping the balance of what you do in class and outside class. So we see the whole university environment as a space for growth, as a space for making friends and also exploring more about ourselves. That's where I got to learn more about this passion that I had. And I'm glad that I had to find a fertile ground at the University of Venda that allowed it to grow. But also this bringing it back to my classroom work, because I'm a student of international relations. And this made me now to focus more on cultural diplomacy, of which this stems from what I would do in the performance arts. So I would say that the university is a platform where you find all of these elements. And we just have to, as students, realize and get to a place where we understand that, you know, there's more to university life than what we learn in class. So the university experience as well, you're out of the class experiences, extracurricular activities, they are all important, because we also saw with the outbreak of COVID that, you know, there are certain special skills that are needed for one to thrive in the new world. And these are some of the skills that were not taught in class. So I think we are moving into a system where now the banking system of universities, of which students must get into class and be taught something for a certain period, and then they are going to be given an exam. It's changing to we're now at a place where everything that has to do with the university is important. And now we are discussing things like, is the university with an incubator, or is the university an incubator? And in answering this question, I would say that the university has to be an incubator. It has to be a space for growth. It has to allow your extracurricular life to mingle with what you do in class. So, because by making sure that you balance the two, it also gives you peace of mind, because, you know, as students, this is one element that we sometimes forget. Like, peace of mind is very important, because many students get to a point where they are facing mental health challenges because of the fact that they stress a lot about schoolwork, and that is because they don't have other platforms for them to actually zone out, to just say, oh, let me just go listen to music. And we must move to a space where now we make sure that all of these elements work together as one, instead of others being seen as more important than others. The university space in itself is just an environment for growth.
Thank you very much, Promise. And colleagues, we have run, unfortunately, out of time. I'm reminding you of the 5th EDHE, the Khotla and the Student Entrepreneurs in Durban. And it's a gathering of leaders in university entrepreneurship. You can find all the details on www.edhe.coza.za and on social media. And 4 themes came through for me in terms of the session is really reimagining the distribution of resources, not only for students, but also for the university as such, to create an enabling environment. Also creating an innovation for teaching and learning and research approaches, specifically in terms of entrepreneur outcomes, The quadruple helix in terms of an engaged university is one of the pivotal issues that we need to work on going forward. And lastly, university leaders is the drivers. It has to become part of the executive portfolio for this initiative to be strong and to grow stronger and to create an economic re-innovation within our country. So colleagues, from my side, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us, and thank you very much for your comments and contributions, and to the speakers and participants. You were excellent in terms of what your message that you wanted to drive through. Colleagues, this is the end of the session. Thank you very much.